welcome to another of my vlogs. I hope you're all managing to get out and get a few rides in this beautiful weather, and that you're managing to keep away from the coronavirus. As you'll see, it's a nice day today. Blue skies behind, about 10 C, and there's a cool westerly wind at about 15 kilometers an hour. Join me today as I ride through Carlton, approximately 12 kilometres into a 100 kilometre ride. I've entitled this ride We Need GT85, and if any of you know the Teesside area, you might be able to guess which cafe I'm going to pass that might need that material. Otherwise, I'll explain when we get there. Now, by the time you see this video, Audax rides will have restarted on the 29th of March. Some of you will be wondering what an Audax ride is. You may already know what a Sportive is, or maybe have undertaken one. Well, during this ride, we'll contrast Audax rides and Sportive rides, so that you can get a better idea of what they are. I'm going to continue on my ride by making my way towards Bishopton, then turning left and crossing over the A66. Go through Long Newton and stop there for a chat about Sporties. We've just come through Long Newton now, and we're about 22 kilometres into the ride. But let's spend a little while thinking about what Sportives are. A Sportive follows a set route. You might be given a GPX file to put in your GPS device. But that's not really necessary, as every junction will be signposted, so that people who don't have any knowledge of navigation can follow the route. If there's multiple routes, then there'll be coloured arrows for each of the different routes. The Sporties normally are 100 miles maximum. That's approximately 160 kilometres. And they are timed, so it often lands up with individuals or groups using them as a race. There is also food and water stations on a Sportive. These will probably have cakes, energy gels, fruit, water, maybe even tea and coffee. And they'll be spaced out around the route. You will also have access to mechanics. Sometimes these are mobile on motorbikes and can come to you if you have a mechanical problem. Sometimes they're in a broom wagon, which comes and sweeps up behind the last riders. You may have to wait until it arrives before you get help. There's always an emergency number, and the broom wagon will also pick up individuals who have become exhausted or who have terminal mechanical problems, and then we'll deliver them back to the start. For that, you will pay a significant amount of money. Normally Sporties start at about £25 and can go up to quite serious money. So you may need to consider whether you can afford to undertake Sportives. Well, I'm about to get going again, and I'm going to go down the airport road, and at the roundabout with the A67 I'll turn left and go along to Eaglescliff, then down through Yarm, and then finally up the Spittal past Kirklevington until I turn off heading for Picton. At this junction we join the route which I included in my vlog called Visit the Countryside. We'll be following that route all the way to Appledon Wisk. I've just passed through the village of Picton, so as promised we'll have a chat about Audax rides now. Audax rides are different from Sporties. There is no set route and they have to be completed within a set elapsed time. That includes food stops and rest stops. They are much longer than the Sporties. Generally they start at 200 kilometres and go up in 100 kilometre increments to a maximum of 1400 kilometres. That's somewhere between 120 miles and 800 miles. There's even some that are longer than that. There are rides which are at 50 kilometres, mainly for children and their parents or people who are just getting into Audax, 100 kilometres and 150 kilometres, which are known as popular rides. All Audax rides have a minimum speed of 15 kilometres an hour and a maximum of 30 kilometres an hour. That's between 10 and 20 miles per hour. Unlike Sporties, there are no times published for the Audax rides, only whether you completed it or did not finish. Riders are expected to be self-sufficient, be able to navigate themselves around the country and to handle any minor mechanical failures that occur. In the event that a rider suffers a major mechanical, then they are expected to make their own way home, having notified the organiser that they will not complete. An Audax ride does not have a set route. You may be sent a route sheet or a GPX file by the organiser, but that is not a mandatory route. The important thing on an Audax ride is that you pass specific locations in a particular order. Now these locations are given to you before the ride starts on a brevet card, which needs to be completed as you go around the route. There are two distinct locations that you have to pass through. The first of these is control points, where you must provide proof of passage. This must include the time at which you arrived. This can be in the form of a receipt, say from a cafe or an ATM, a stamp which is only available between particular times at the location, or by the signature and time provided by a volunteer who is located at that position. Thus, the control points are used to determine whether you have exceeded the maximum speed or have not arrived in time with the minimum speed. So what happens if you arrive at a control point before you should do? Then you just have to sit there and wait and get your receipt, stamp or signature after the appropriate time. Any stamp or receipt provided prior to that time will mean that you will not be defined as completing the ride. Similarly, if you're outside the longest time defined by the minimum speed to that point, then you will again be classed as not having finished the ride. The other is an information point, where all you have to do is to answer a particular question that is on the brevet. This just defines that you have been past that point on your ride. Finally, the charge for an Audax ride is generally around about £5. I'm now going to make my way down to Appledon Wisk, to the post office there, for a cup of coffee and a quick bite to eat. Well, that was an enjoyable break. A mince pie and a bit of carrot cake, cup of coffee, all for £4. Lovely. Now we're off again, making our way over to East Roughton. and look at that panorama of the Cleveland Hills. And then towards Hutton Rugby before taking the road down to Swainby. Any closer to guessing the reason for the name of the ride? And along here is a cafe that was the inspiration for the name of this ride. The next section of the ride could be done along the A172 here, but today I'm going to take a quiet loop called the Golden Loop, which will mean that I minimise the amount of time I'm on that potentially busy road. Maybe I need to explain that GT85 is a bicycle lubricant. At the end of the loop we have to turn left onto the A172 just for a few hundred yards to the top of the hill, and then turn right and make our way up to Faceby. Look at the beautiful views of the Cleveland Hills that we get from here. The climb into Faceby is quite constant, and is relatively easy until at the Sutton Arms and get another little kick. Now it's through the cobbled ford, so a little bit rough as we go through. Isn't that a beautiful sight of the Cleveland Hills? So far, what I've talked about in terms of Audax relates to calendar events, which, just like Sporties, are organised by clubs all over the country and are published in a calendar in the Audax UK website. However, there are not many calendar events in the northeast of England, so I mainly participate in an alternative type of Audax known as a DIY, do it yourself, are administered by an Audax UK volunteer to whom I have to nominate the distance I'm going to travel within the set numbers of 100, 150, 200, 300, etc., and provide a GPX file of the route. I then have to nominate some control points within that route. Normally these have to be no more than 50 kilometres apart, but on a ride of say 100 kilometres, I'll nominate them at approximately 1/3 or 2/3 of the distance. So in this particular ride, the first control point would be at Kirklevington, which is almost 1/3 of the distance, and the second would be at Kirkby, which we've still to reach. Following the ride, I have to send the track log file to that volunteer, and he then checks that A, I have followed my route, or if I have had to deviate, for example due to a closed road, that I have explained this and the deviation was greater than the distance that I would have travelled if I had continued on my own route, that I have reached the control points at the appropriate time slot, taking into account the minimum and maximum speeds that are allowed, and then finally, if those are all okay, he'll validate it and it will be recorded in my folder on the Audax UK website. These DIY rides are much more flexible, as once you have sent off your GPX file, you don't have to nominate when you are going to do the ride until the actual day. By sending an email even up to 5 minutes before you start, the volunteer knows that you've nominated that you will do it that day. Your start time is actually determined from your track log. We're at Carlton in Cleveland now, having done approximately 60 kilometres. So we'll continue along the foot of the Cleveland Hills. The weather's beautiful today. Nice blue sky. Wind not too strong, but it is a bit cool when you're facing it. But look at the scene over there. Isn't that just beautiful? At the crossroads here in Kirkby, we'll turn left and make our way down to Stokesley. And you can see with all the flowers out that spring has really sprung. The road down from Kirkby is pretty rough, especially past the industrial estate. Just take your time, choose your line, and you'll get down there without any trouble. We'll make our way through Stokesley High Street and out to Tame Bridge, where we'll turn right for Sema. And so you can see the view across the Tees Valley. Still a bit hazy today, but what a view! Right out to the edge of the Pennines. And now we turn left here and make our way back into Ingleby Barrack. And now we're making our way back into Stockton. I'll leave a link to the track log for this ride in the description. Well, it's sunny again and everybody's come down the Barrage. Though it's no parking spaces in the car park. Having circumnavigated the Portrack roundabouts again, it's back up the side of the A19 to Billingham. And look at the traffic. Almost back to normal for a Saturday. We're almost back in Billingham now, and I've got 97 kilometres on the Garmin. Should be able to quite easily make the last 3 on the way up to my home. I hope you found the explanation of the differences between Sportives and Audaxes was useful and interesting. If you want more information, then I suggest that you have a look at Audax UK webpage. Well, thank you for coming along with me today. Been a brilliant day again, and until we meet again, bye for now, stay safe.